All right, we've got it. Okay, we're recording. All right, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of a busy day at a particularly hectic time of the year to come and join us as we try to get a pilot off the ground. This particular pilot, it has a ton of moving pieces, and I can't think of one portion of the university that isn't going to be touched by it in some fashion. Even if it's for, okay, what's phase two? Are we going to continue it? Are we going to expand it? That's always the goal of research, of course, is that you gather useful data to direct your actions in the future. And we want to make sure that we have data that back up the efficacy of what our proposal is. So we're going to briefly go through the research that Steve has conducted, and then the whole last portion will be you telling us what you think needs to be done for you to be able to do your piece of this pilot. I don't think it needs any introduction why we're here and what the issue is. Medical coding and billing's got a 10% graduation rate. We have 500 appeals. And I've been here for 2 years now, so I've done enough. I do all my appeals myself because I want to try to get a feel for why do we have such a failure rate? Why do we have such a drop rate? How do we handle these appeals that come in? And several trends became clear to me right at the beginning, just anecdotally, without having the luxury of asking Steve to run the data analysis for me, was that SAP warnings went into SAP suspensions. We have no intervention that I can find, and I could be wrong at that, but I've looked, I've asked, I've talked to people. People just go from P1 SAP warning into P2 SAP suspension, and that shouldn't be a surprise to us because we don't do anything to intervene in that downward trend. And the other one is that students that need third attempt appeals, and I don't generally do fourth or fifth attempts, although some of the deans do, need third attempt appeals will simply fail it again if you let them continue with their full-time loads. And of course, the students generally want to continue with their full-time loads because these are almost exclusively financial aid students. So several things just popped right out at us that Steve will show you in a minute, but one of them you already probably are aware of, in that simply being financial aid students is an independent risk factor for failure. What we weren't expecting was such an overwhelming risk factor for failure. And so that's helping drive our interventions for this pilot. But because we want to be able to control unexpected consequences, we are trying to keep the initial rollout narrow. My plan is to expand it throughout all of allied health. Nursing doesn't really have a need for it. The other thing that's still open is it the same if they go from P1 to P2 at the beginning of the program and the end of the program? And I will tell you that my initial thought for this was that I was going to have them go part-time throughout the whole medical coding and billing program. Steve's data shows that, and he said this to me in these exact words, it's a different student issue when they fail 3/4 of the way through the program. And so I'm going to back that up and follow Steve's recommendation and where the data takes us, and only do this at the beginning of the program. But what I'm going to do from P1 to P2 after I think about 26 credits is that we're going to have a faculty intervention. I'm pulling over the at-risk program that's been in place for quite some time in nursing, and I have the data to show it's successful, into medical coding and billing. So the intervention at P1 for those students that are further into the program will be more academic, a more aggressive faculty is going to go in their next 2 courses with them. So they're going to have a private mentor in their next 2 courses. So Steve, I will shut up and let you show us what you found.
Okay. So again, the data we've collected for this was looking at specifically medical coding and billing students when they hit P1, and then also the third attempt appeal. So the information we'll share today is just to get your agreement and buy-in that, hey, there is a big opportunity here we've uncovered from the data we've looked at, and just make sure as a group we all agree. So first, the P1 SAP warning students. In the entire university for undergrads, 85% of P1 students automatically move to P2. We have currently no early intervention methods. At one time in my tenure here, we did have some outreach, but it was basically an email to the student that said, hey, here's the library, or hey, here's the tutor request. So
well, can I just say, like, a for the record thing, like there's not any outreach going on with these students. There's tons of outreach going on by their essays. They're talking about it. It may not be in every note, but especially the foundations team now with the new guys, like they're really, really hitting on it. However, it's not going to see, we're not going to see the impact of anything for time to come.
Okay.
So like we've done some major training with the SAP calculator. We have tests now where we send out conversations and like how like outcomes would happen from the students. So they are happening. I hate that we're saying that there's no intervention for these students to make it sound like we're not helping these guys at all.
Are those things new, or have they been going on all along?
No, they're for sure new.
Okay.
But I would also say we have some major room for improvement with these students to have specific, like I would love to have a SAP team for these students. We have some ideas, but so I don't want to say that I don't disagree there's a problem.
Let me quantify that. No early intervention is a second floor statement. Like, yes, you're doing things downstairs that would fit into an intervention category, but academically there's no intentionality upstairs.
Okay. I just want to make sure people don't think
that's a good point.
SAP students.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Right. And so basically, I'm not doing anything from an academic standpoint. I have no measures in place in medical coding and billing. I have measures in place in nursing. I don't have any interventions in place here. Plus, Steve and I have been working on this for a very long time, and it actually precedes some of what your initiatives downstairs have been.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Thank you.
So the scope of this project, should we see the opportunity in it, would be first semester at GU medical coding and billing students only. Although, as a side note, the AA programs in the business school act very similar to what medical coding and billing does. So there's some commonalities there. And then in that, we would be forcing a student into part-time enrollment in the second semester. We feel like if we did that, we're going to improve students going from P1 back to good standing, which would increase persistence, or at least the eligibility to continue. It's going to provide Dr. Rules with clearly a greater insight to the SAP appeal if the student does go to P2. For example, if the student was all F and W's in the first semester, and then we did a reduced course load in the second, and they were F's and W's again, that says something compared to the student that is 2 C's in the second semester taking a reduced course load. So greater insight for the deans looking at the appeal. And then we feel like in the long run, there'll be a greater percentage of medical coding and billing students going farther into the degree program. So business impact, there's no additional expenses to run these pilots. The investment is redirecting employee work hours, because this will be a manual process, at least out of the gate. And then we would probably want to analyze this short-term slight negative impact, taking a student from 12 hours in a term down to 6. Like, there's an impact there, at least in the short term. And soft dollars, hard dollars. Hard dollars are revenue or budget, like real money. Soft dollars are, we're going to ask Steve to do something different with his day. Doesn't cost us any money, but it is a lot. I'm not doing what I normally do if I'm doing this. Long term, we feel like this allows the student to continue further in the program if they're successful, right? And if they're not successful and may not be here for the right reasons, then at least we've limited to our ability how much loans the student's taking by reducing their hours, is our guess. Any questions on that? We see how the math kind of works if I'm successful. Third attempt appeals, as Dr. Rule said, the deans spend a large amount of their day in appeals. It's probably not a good use of time. And just for example, there's been, I think this is Tuesday's number, not Friday's number, but 939 third attempt appeals requests this year. That's 900.
For just that program, or?
No, all And
Total?
all total. So, and then what we'll show further in the brief with the data is students are much more successful taking that third attempt by itself rather than taking it with an additional class. Again, the treatment group, the scope is just medical coding and billing students. It's all third attempts for them. And we're saying that the dean would need to see it. We're going to approve it. And with that approval, you must take it by itself. So it's going to speed up the process.
And it won't matter which course, if it's a math course or a medical coding and billing course.
Doesn't matter.
Or a, okay.
Program deans review all third attempts now anyway. They don't go to, they used to go to course deans, but now it's program deans. So yes. Again, no additional expenses to run the pilot. It's a redirection of a few work hours for employees. An insignificant negative short-term impact here just because of the success rate. And then a slight reduction in time that we'll spend managing appeals. And it will provide a quicker response to the student. If that comes in the appeal queue today, I can get that out in 10 minutes with the approval rather than going to the dean and back and forth. So
you're saying on all third attempts for this program, they'll be approved if the student takes it alone?
they'll be approved without the dean's review and
Okay.
with the stipulation it must be taken alone.
Okay.
We do that most of the time now for medical coding and billing anyway, so that's not a change. So here's the honest and open sharing of information of how the data was collected to make sure I haven't sliced it the wrong way. We took all undergraduate SAP outcomes from January of 2015 through the end of October 2018. Almost 66,000 SAP outcomes. Those included good standing to good standing to P1, P1 back to good standing, and then P1 to P2 suspended. The data elements that were excluded were any probationary outcomes, like if a student has a SAP appeal approved, this is beyond the scope of this project. We removed all of those, and then we removed all the nursing outcomes because that is just a different student. And there's, I think, Cheryl reminded me that there was 8 P1s total in the nursing program.
Yes.
In 2015, it was a very
Yeah.
nice number. And then for the third appeal attempts, I did a sampling of 136. And those appeals were approved during May of 2017 and then April through July of this year. Okay, busy chart. You don't have to look at this. I'm just going to tell you, we pulled that data with the SAP stuff to capture baseline information to start our measurement from. So we've captured failure rates, success rates, P1s to P2s, P1s back to GSs, and then I've categorized that by programs, 2-year programs, 4-year programs, certificate programs. And then here's a bias evaluation. Because we didn't sample, this is every outcome basically from January 2015 to October 2018. There's really no bias that can occur because we're not slicing things out other than the nursing, which is a non-player in this anyway. So a lot of information there to say we felt like there was no bias in this part of the evaluation. For the third attempt appeals, again, we pulled the 136 samples of approved appeals, again, to establish baselines. Success rates if I take it by myself, success rates if that's voluntary or if it's a dean stipulation, and then how does that compare against students who are approved to take a third attempt and pair it with another course.
Do you have any that do that voluntarily?
There are a few. The numbers are in here. Yep, there are a few. So there is, in my opinion, some bias in this data. One, it's a short window, right? It was July of last year and then April through May of this year. So because of the time frame, we're assuming that what happened in that window, if we looked at way back in time, it would be the same. So there is some bias there in the timeline of which the data was pulled. I excluded all 400 level classes and most 300 level classes. So there is some bias there that clearly if we added those back to the data, the outcomes would probably increase. Yeah. It's a different student. But there's so few of them, it may not have. So, and then again, I didn't do the level of determination on was the appeal approving the new attempt a third, fourth, or fifth. So all of these are categorized as third attempts in my data. So some of them could have been a fourth or fifth attempt. But Other than the time period and those few exclusions, that's the only bias that could be in there. So here's our effort at justifying the SAP warning project. So this shows 2-year programs, 4-year programs, certificates, and non-degree seeking students and their SAP outcomes. So good standing in, good standing out. You can see there's a significant difference there between 2-year programs, I like that, 75%, versus the 4-year, it's almost 91%, or CERT programs, 87%. And then the P1 to GS is such a low success rate. I think we can put all of those, I don't care how you slice it, by program, by start date, by whatever. That's a very low success rate.
Have we seen any change, like just recently, maybe in the last like 60 days, the change from like P1 to P2? I feel like I see less students getting suspended, but I think there may be less P1 students that are just like staying in P1 and not continuing on. Have you seen that at all?
I can't see the non-participation after the outcome because I need an outcome to measure it.
Right.
So that could be happening. Students stopping out after the first semester or after reaching P1.
Right. Do you feel like you've seen less students going to P2?
If we're counting them, yes.
Okay.
By proportion, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. Thank you.
So in other words, there's fewer students because our enrollment's down.
Yeah.
But basically, this is a very depressing slide. For me, this is a very depressing slide. It simply says that if they go into SAP warning, they're not going to succeed. They're not going to be successful in the program. So if we can't reverse this by some intervention, then it almost is worth talking about whether or not we even have this process of P1 to P2 and racking up, four more usually 2 more terms at least of financial aid.
Then we just, because that is so significant, a 75% success rate compared to the almost 90s in the other categories, just took the 2-year program and blew this out by school or college. So we can see arts and sciences has a 79% success rate. Engineering and computer science is 83. And then again, remember, business and allied health act very similar, and they're in the low 70% success rate. And then again, P1, once you're a P1, that is almost impossible to correct. Very few students, and those do occur later in the programming. So we felt like there's 2 opportunities for sure, based on just the data. But this, again, the scope for the pilot, if we do it, is just allied health. So if we look at GS to P1 and when that occurs by school or college, you can see that most of that P1 outcomes occur after the first semester, regardless of the program you're in, regardless of the school you're in. But clearly for the business, school, and allied health, almost 60% of all P1s occur after the first semester.
These are the students that come
Struggle.
in and they just come in and they either disappear,
Yep.
or they didn't intend to do anything in the first place, which I think we're going to be seeing less and less and less as we go. But for sure, I mean, this doesn't shock me at all based on the feedback that I hear specifically from the SAs who get super frustrated because they're like, "We want to help you. Call us back. What are you doing? Please."
So we feel like if we're going to shoot at a target, that first semester, first 2 terms is
math too. I mean, once you have some success under your belt, it's harder to get
absolutely
under
the best.
Absolutely.
The best prediction of future success is past.
in the first round, it's
You feel
gonna be
good.
harder to knock you under the
Absolutely.
SAP things
Yep.
in future rounds.
Yep.
Does it have anything to do with the courses that they take?
That's something we can definitely look into as we start the pilot of capturing all that data. And that would be good to make sure that on my last slide, we have that as a data element we're going to measure.
And that's really a good question for medical coding and billing, because over a year ago, I put all of the gen eds up front. And I did that because I had so many students that were P2ing that I am able to send them back into their ground community college if all they need is an MA 101 and MA 105 and a CO 101. And I do that on a regular basis. But if they're into the core allied health courses, there's no way they can take that anywhere else. And so I was put in the position of of having to approve fourth and fifth attempt appeals. So up front, with those gen eds is another way for me to tell, is this student ready for the rigors of college academics? And remember, they get 3 attempts at MA 105 and CO 101. So anybody that has a high school diploma or equivalency should be able to pass those courses. Many people have 5th graders that could pass those courses in 3 attempts.
The next, we looked at the P1 back to GS, which again, this is a very difficult category to be successful in. But for allied health, those students that do work their way back to good standing, if that's occurring, 46% of that is occurring in semester 2. So 46 of all P1s back to GS occur in semester 2 if they do become, if they're part of that 15% overall success rate.
These
So,
are Grantham credit hours, right? Like no
yes.
transfer. Okay.
No. Well, SAP includes transfer hours in the evaluation.
So it's including all that apply to their program.
Yes. Yeah. So again, the sweet spot there is if we're going to intervene and try to be mindful about it, we feel like that second semester is the place to do it. So trying to find the sweet spot, again, this is the summary. 58% of all P1s for medical coding and billing students occur after the first semester. And then 46% of the students that are able to work their way back to good standing happen in the second semester. So clearly we feel like we have our targets aligned properly with the data, that after the first semester they do course reduction in hopes of improving where they're improving now. Okay, so here's a slice that is probably not going to be surprising, but it sort of did surprise me. So if we took those students by college or school, and the ones that are using FA only as their funding source, there's the success rates. So I mean, it's kind of surprising that it's 66% in arts and sciences, but 72% in allied health. Like we like to condemn that program with that funding source, and then look at the data. It does better than 2 of the others. So it's again, it's not good data, meaning successful data, but it's accurate data. And then if we add in students that are using some FA, so it's a multiple funding source issue, that it doesn't increase the success rate much, and actually the business school went down. So it's kind of odd there. And then non-FAs. Okay, so mind-blowing. 90% basically across the board of non-FA students go from GS to GS. So if we really wanted to target our efforts, this gives us another target.
Is that what you said?
This is all outcomes.
Just all. Okay.
Yeah. So again, the difference in some FA and no FA is tremendous. So here's our recommendation for the pilot, should we choose to execute it. Again, it's for medical coding and billing students only. So we have a P1 SAP outcome. We ask the question, is it a medical coding and billing student? Yes. Is it a first semester medical coding and student? Yes. Then we're going to do course reduction for the next 2 terms. Notice that says manual process, because I don't know how we do this any other way than manually. If the student's already enrolled in 2 classes, we manually reduce that to 1. And then collect data. So there's the metrics at the bottom that we're going to use. An input metric is what happens to trigger, hey, we got to capture something. The process metric is what's happening in the process. And then the output is what we'll capture to analyze were we successful or not. So, and this is where, Abu Bakr, we'd want to make sure you had mentioned what actual courses they're taking.
Yes. As if the course has any impact on this.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll add the specific courses to this. I don't think I have that on there. But we do have the impact of the GPA and CCR. Did it increase or decrease? If students W, how many days were they in class? On and on and on. So now into the third attempts. So across the top, that's A through D, meaning the student attempted the course for a third. Or
Back a second.
yes,
So
yes.
sorry to
No.
interrupt you. I was just processing it in my brain. Where it says after first semester. So let's say a student comes in and takes 1 term, goes away, comes back, takes a 2nd term. even if it's been a year, we're gonna measure it that way, right? Like regardless of time, we're gonna measure it by their number of terms at Grantham.
I think that's the intent.
Okay.
But we could
No,
identify
that's what makes
one-offs.
sense in my head. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that I
Yeah.
was thinking what you were thinking. Okay.
So basically, the first true SAP outcome
Right.
for medical coding. Yeah.
Could you actually back up one more time?
Sure.
Sorry. On this one, just a quick question.
Mhm.
Are we looking at any other factors on the student other than just if they're using financial aid, some financial aid or non-financial aid, like their academic history, if they've attended other schools, or
Not with this.
how far from now to the last time you're actually in a educational environment?
No. But
Maybe an issue of academic preparedness.
Sure. Yep. So what do you call that?
Have
Like
that
academic
data.
history?
I mean, those are all like super
timeline?
valid things that we want. Like, I want to be able to measure too before they even come in, because the whole idea is that if we could have a risk factor for a student prior to them even starting, whether based on all of those things that Tom just mentioned, that could be super powerful to the interventions or the things that we provide a student before day one. Because to kind of to Cheryl's point, I think, after one semester, is it even too late at that point? Like they've already hit P1 and we've seen what happens. Like, so what factors are what do these students have in common other than just their funding source or their program? How much transfer credit, what is their, time that they have committed to go to school? How old are they? Are they married? Are they not? All of these things could impact whether a student.
I thought that you guys could put some type of information like that, asking them.
We've talked about this for a while. I've talked with Ben and I've talked with Jeff, but we just don't have the data right now. And so I think it's a matter of, one, do we even know how to get it? Two, if we get it, where do we put it? And then three, how do we analyze it? So I think it's something we've talked about for a long time, and I think we can continue to talk about it and do things like this to make little improvements. But I just think it'd be super powerful to have a score for a student day one. The student is at risk, like we know. And that could then adjust even more how we advise students downstairs and portfolios and whatever they may be. If they have like a chance of the student failing is like only 1%, okay, then they don't need foundations help. Just send them on up to somebody they're probably going to be right where they need to be. Or the chance of the student failing and going to SAP suspension after their first semester is like 95%. Okay, all hands on deck. What are we going to do to help this student? They get assigned a special faculty person, or whatever. Anyway, I'm going on it.
And you certainly can design research like that. It's a matter, your attributes, what you're talking about are student attributes, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to put together a template of what you consider risk factors for student attributes. Those attributes simply they become variables. And if you have an SPSS program, you just plug in your variables. But you first of all, you guys would have to make a list of what you think are attributes that make them of academic concern, and then we have to have somebody that's going to do the research and do that. We're lucky and blessed to have Steve here doing this for us.
And to back up in time a few years in my old Lean Six Sigma days is you want that type. What are we going to collect? Well in advance.
Right.
Like we don't want to get into it and say, oh, I wish we would have captured eye color. Like that's too late.
Right.
It's too hard.
We are working with financial industries. Yes. When you go into the client, the first thing you ask them is like your risk tolerance.
Yes, absolutely.
You know where they are. I think that's pretty much the same model that we need to use in this thing. In the very first time, where are you? What do we need to do here to get you to this assessment? And you're right. We can always later to get to the question to respond us.
Yeah, I used to joke with Cheryl Hayek a lot and said, our problem students are the left-handed blue-eyed boys left of the Mississippi. Like, if that's the data we want to collect, we need to identify that up front, and then it's easy to analyze and cut and slice afterwards. But
there is a list of, I'm trying to find it now. I'll be able to find it. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a list of risk factors for student success. And some of them are kind of surprising because they're counterintuitive. But like, for instance, which would be a lot of our students, are they working?
Yeah.
Being employed is actually a risk factor because it's competing for their time. But Yeah, so we may want to look at that list because it's I think it's like 7 things. It's not a super deep,
Right.
but there's already been a lot of study on those risk factors, and they may be ones that are somewhat easy, or they may even be fields that are gathered for various forms when people are doing research and things like that.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but I think we need to focus on this.
Well, sure, we do. You're right. I know. I got us all on a tangent.
The one question though that I was wondering
That's
was the unusual enrollment history students, who a lot of them will no longer be in the mix going forward. Do they represent a lot of this? Or
Yes.
no?
No,
Are they a big portion of it?
they're-
They're probably a good
The
chunk.
overwhelming
I mean,
majority.
just because they're, that chunk is FA heavy.
Right,
That-
right. That's why I wondered if they were kind of the same group of people.
Okay, so the third attempt data, so across the top is A through D. So there's a little skewedness there, right? Because you could be in an engineering program and D not be successful.
Sure.
Some of the courses, but it's thrown in there. So successful A through D, an F, a W. NA means they had approval for the course to take it, but haven't enrolled yet. Registered means they're actively in the course or pre-registered to take the course, and then the total. So if we look at the top, medical coding and billing students, success rate, third attempts is 71%. 2-year programs, 4-year programs, 2 and 4-year programs combined, nowhere near that. So one, as a data guy, you're like, what's going on there? How come they're, again, this is medical coding and billing, right? Like that's our problem children, we say, not third attempts. And that's because Cyril's already doing what we're proposing to do officially, of 1 course at a time. Again, so here's the data I think you asked about, Lauren, if it's taken alone voluntary or a stipulation. So I've broken those out. This is all students regardless of program or whatever. So dean stipulated retakes, you have to take it by itself. Students are 69% successful. If they voluntarily retake the course alone, they're at 62. And if the course is not taken alone, if it's taken with another course, 38% of those are successful. So
This is all programs.
all
Is everything
programs.
okay?
This is 136 from the sample,
Right.
all 136, yeah.
I think it would be higher if they voluntarily selected.
So look, here's the thing that jumped at me with that. One, it's a little bit lower.
Yeah.
But two, look at the
Essay.
W's. If I voluntarily take it
Yeah.
alone, there's no W's.
That's true.
So that's the thing that kind of jumped at me, that kind of justified the 62% versus the 69%.
Yeah.
At least they made it to day 56, right? They chugged through it.
Well, the voluntary take alone could be those NFA students that take all their classes alone.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, there's no distinction
Could
on,
just be
they just
a
did.
part-time how they do part-time,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
It's not, they're like,
I'm
I'm
just
just gonna
different.
do this one because I'm gonna succeed this time. You
Right.
know, I mean, it's just how they do it.
Right.
Good point.
So again, the data surely supports that you're more successful the less hours you're carrying. So this is medical coding and billing only. If the course is taken alone, 76% success rate. If it's not taken alone, again, it's a very small N there. It's only 3, but 1 out of 3 are successful. Compared to non-medical, this is all non-medical coding and billing students. Taken alone, 61% versus the 76. So Cyril's got something going on over there in that program. Maybe it's just GP 210 and everybody else is taking MA 215. I don't know, but that's something we'd want to peel back in the process. So the third attempt process might look like the student submits the appeal, automatic approval. I'll do that to the end of the year anyway. So let the student know, let the SA know, and then collect the data here we've got in our output metrics. So, and Cyril, I have one little asterisk there of outliers. We need to make sure that you clearly articulate anybody that you would not want automatic approval. Like if the student has 28 Fs and Ws and somehow, I mean, like, I'm sure there's some outliers there that we would exclude, but we just need to talk about those. Questions on this?
People moving stuff or what? It's super distracting.
So next steps. As a group, can we agree that the statistical data supports the running of the pilots? We would agree it's a great opportunity in those 2 fields.
Yeah.
Any concerns around the data that I sliced it the wrong way or I'm trying to present a project that's not real? Okay.
Well,
No,
I mean,
hey,
it's you.
again,
So.
that's the
I would
reason
say
I
if
asked.
that there was gonna be anything to disagree with walking in the spring.
Okay. It never hurts to validate, right? So the next step would be establishing that manual process around the P1s and how we do that. I think we do that outside this effort. My recommendation would be some type of student advising, registrar,
Yeah.
Cheryl, and then somebody else that can figure out what that process looks like in roles. And I would think a reasonable timeline for that would be have agreements on that before Christmas. For third and 10th appeals, again, Cheryl and I would just need to figure out, are there any exclusions from those automatic approvals? And then is it reasonable to start both pilots January 1st? Good, done. It's on the record. And here's some generational stuff. It's not really pertinent to the pilot today, but if we show the success we believe we're going to have, then clearly we'd want to automate the enrollment process. So there's automation in here. There's
Too, right?
So there's policy updates. We may want to roll that across the entire university. So, and that's just kind of like the generational thing that if we're successful and we continue the success, then we're going to continue pushing the ball down the field.
And that's one of the reasons that, thank you so much, Steve. That's one of the reasons that that we taped this, to the deans, and of course, Anthony are aware of this, but I really have not invited them in. I've found from experience that sometimes these things don't work if you just bite off too big of a piece to chew at the beginning. And my students sometimes look different than other people's students. So I just wanted to do, a very narrow scoped a pilot that is partially already in force because I've already been doing the third attempts. Those essays that work with medical coding and billing are aware of that. But I will send the tape out to all the other deans and stakeholders so that they're aware, and if at some point in time they want to be a part of it, that I think if it shows the efficacy, then it would be silly not to look at it from a university standpoint. But that's just not where we're going to start. I'm particularly concerned about the essays, and I'm very protective of our essays, and I think that they do a terrific job, and they already catch a lot of crap from students. The most aggressive pushback that we get are those students that are living on their financial aid. And so sometimes in my my crabbier days, I think that the only reason they actually suck it up and pass the course is so they can go back to full-time financial aid. I try not to think like that very often, but I'm probably not the only one in the room, right?
Everybody's motivated by something.
Motivated by, yeah, go. A true sister. So I think this is the only group meeting we'll have. What I'm hoping is that you will all go back to your department, create a plan for January 1st when this begins, because these won't be just incoming students. I'm assuming actually there'll probably be students that are currently getting ready to fail this term and the December term, which will come up front to us first. And then let us know what questions, problems, concerns you have with going forward with it. Can you think of any right now that we should share in this room?
So do we have, Michelle, questions for you. Do you think there's a way to identify these students kind of like we do the failed prereq students, where we can say, okay, it's term start. Do we have any students that just hit P1 that are in 2 classes that are in this program? If so, drop them out and we'll call them and see which class they want to stay in or whatever. Is there a way that we can maybe manage it through that process? Because I think we've gotten that one down. I know it's a little manual-ish, but we've got it down to a somewhat science.
When you identify the number of courses, does it identify future term registration?
It will tell you if there's a future registration out there, but not course load. Not course load. It'll give you the term they're enrolled in, but not course load.
So we could potentially look at all students who recently moved on average, what do we have the number of students from this program that go to P1 after a term ends? Do you know?
It's over 50%.
number-wise, do you know, like what the number of students is that go to a P1 standing from this program?
No, I don't have a count.
Okay, so that, we probably need to figure that out, because if it's like 15, we can go through and I can get
It's
them the
on here.
essays and have them look at it, you know, if it's 300, probably not, you know. So I think, Cheryl, that's kind of the stuff that we probably need to sit down. So when we say we don't need another group meeting, we may not need this entire group, but we probably need
Look at what reports they have.
advising, registrar, and potentially.
For sure. For sure. Anybody that thinks that we need a more defined meeting to figure out for your particular department, just let us know. Because it's a little bit dicier in medical coding and billing as well, because they're required to immediately repeat their Fs.
Right.
Although if they fail one class and pass the other and they're not in P1, I don't make them, they can finish their term if you've already got them re-enrolled, because we enroll so far ahead of time. I don't like pulling students out of class willy-nilly, but they have to, within very, very short period of time, go back and take that F. So again, you'd have to look and see what classes do they have Fs outstanding, because if they're early in the program, that one F plays a huge factor in that P1 to P2. Steve's always like, get rid of that F, Cheryl. Make them take that class, get rid of that F. That'll keep them out of P1 and P2. So that's a major reason why the students, I know the students, again, they push back about that. I just failed it. Why do I have to take it again? Because it's an F that's sitting there that's going to wreck your GPA and put you either in P1 or move you from P1 to P2. It's the same thing with the W's and the CCRs. Students do not get the impact that all those W's have. So I'm going to be turning attention to W's next, because they just, all over in the notes, I hear students saying, I have to withdraw because I'm going to fail it. You're better off failing it. If at a certain point, if your grade point average is better than your CCR, you're better off taking the F than you are hitting CCR, because that's a hard stop, right? You're out of the program then. So students don't get all of this. This is all of the intensive academic advising.
Okay.
So it's about 54 a month.
54 students a month.
Ish. And that's
Ish.
across all credit hours essentially. So
Okay.
70%
So
of
even
that,
less than those, will be, yeah.
For semesters.
640 a year or somewhere. in there.
Pam, is this like officially a project, or are you just taking notes, or what are we doing here?
It's my project. I was going to chat with Cheryl. I was gone last week, so I don't know what you guys talked about last week or anything like that. So I'm doing a little bit of catch up. Okay, but I'll probably talk with Cheryl.
So it sounds like maybe if you can get like me, Lauren, Steve, and Michelle back in a room, that may be where we can really dig down into
With
the
Tom and
process.
just because
Okay.
we need to make sure we have the good mechanism to get them repackaged.
Oh, when we drop them.
Because
Okay.
they'll be
Good point.
they'll be set up
Okay.
a certain way, and the changes will need to actually come
For
in.
sure.
We have some things that do it. I just
But maybe like the last piece can be like and or 5, whatever, or something if we send a list over or whatever we end up doing. So okay, and then we'll figure out like the actual process piece of it.
Right, 'cause
I think we can
come down
make
to
that
the
happen.
course selection, which ones to reduce.
Well, because if they're
all
in
that
2
mess.
courses, and so like to Cheryl's point, if they're in 2 and they just failed one of those 2, we need to call the student and say, hey, we're going to keep you in the class you just failed. You're going to get pulled out of the other class. Like that's like we'll need to write up some scripting for the essays, but so that's just that process piece. How do we identify those students, and then who all needs to be notified? So whether it's Michelle's team to pull them, Tom's team to make sure they're repackaged, that type of thing.
Did you have some other earlier you wanted to share?
I'm gonna think it through.
Okay.
All right.
Is that it, Cheryl?
That's it for me, unless anybody have anything else you think that we should talk about with this?
No, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, Steve. You were awesome.